Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday to you. Hope everybody is having a good week. Get started here in a second. Going to do a couple charts on volume for Bitcoin and TradFi stocks. I've been thinking a lot about the idea that this time is different, right? That Bitcoin is going to be somehow muted by all of the TradFi adoption that has occurred over the last 2 years. And that will mute the price action of Bitcoin itself. So I'm curious, I don't want this to be a lecture, so let me know if you guys have questions or want to look at something. I'll get started here in just a second. Just 1 second. Sorry for the pausing. So here we have volume, all right? And this is actually spot volume of Bitcoin. I remember very well when Bitcoin passed $1 billion in spot. I guess quick note on volume, right? So volume is usually quoted in the shares in the stock market, or in Bitcoin's case, could be quoted in the units of coins traded, amount of coins traded. But since we're going across ideas, across exchanges, there's a term for it. Usually it's just value of shares traded, or USD value of shares traded. So I'm trying to get to a picture where we can look at Bitcoin Treasury companies, miners, ETFs, look at a little bit of institutionalization of Bitcoin, and see how that compares to just regular TradFi, like global stock market trading. This is kind of a work in progress, but again, I'll just say, so if we zoom in here, right, to the early days, oops, that's too much. 50, 10, tens of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. All right. While Bitcoin is trading at, I should have the price on this chart, but I don't. But $200 for Bitcoin here, during the depths of the crypto winter, as they called it. And the first time we got over $1 billion, I remember it well, was right in the run up to the 2017 top. All right, $1 billion worth of Bitcoin traded spot on global exchanges. Coinbase, Kraken, Binance. Binance is actually just getting started at this point, but Bitstamp. All right. $1 billion started only in 2017. $1 billion worth of Bitcoin traded. So the idea here is that Bitcoin is different this cycle. We talked about this yesterday. Bitcoin is different. People are saying this cycle is going to be muted. It's going to maybe just follow the power curve, if you even believe in the power curve, which I, of course, do, but many don't. Let's try to break this down a little bit more. Okay, so here's spot all the way until today, and we can see that clearly from the 2021 bull, all right, and until today, we're in the not just tens of millions as we were here, but tens of billions. Okay. We can even get up to 100 billion, or this day here in 2021, meme stock madness, 350 billion. These candles are annoying actually because they make it harder to read the rest of the chart, but it is what it is. I'm going to keep it on linear for now. So in the past year, and remember ETFs started about here, a little bit before this in January, 50 billion easy. 50 billion easy in Bitcoin volume. That is dollars of Bitcoin traded worldwide spot. Even here, a couple weeks ago, $180 billion. Okay, so now let's just look at ETFs. All right, I'm going to put on ETFs volume, and I'll go in from when they started. All right, here. It's going to stack on top. Let's look at ETF volume, which is most of the ETFs. It's not all the ETFs, but it's all the US dollar traded ETFs. There are a couple in Europe I'm not counting because of exchange rates for the moment. I'll get them in here, but it's most of the ETFs. All right, you ready? Okay. There's not flows into the ETFs. These are actual, this is the volume of the shares traded. So you can see it's a pretty small minority if you would compare ETF volume in dollar terms with Bitcoin, actual Bitcoin spot volume in Bitcoin terms. All right. So having said that, having established that, let's just even take off spot and let's do a little separate analysis now. Okay. So now we just went from the tens of billions, all right, 78,000 million, $78 billion worth of Bitcoin here. Let's take that off. Let's just look at ETFs. All right, so here you can see, obviously, this is GBTC, mostly GBTC, which is not really an ETF. It was a trust, right? But they were working, offering institutional exposure to Bitcoin. So the biggest days here since in the last 2 years have been, in terms of value of shares traded, is $10 billion a day. Still nothing to scoff at, but way bigger, way smaller than spot itself. All right. Now let's look at miners. Okay. Marathon's in here, Riot. Publicly traded miners. I'm going to put them on. It's going to stack up. All right. Smaller than ETFs. Some days about even, actually, but most days you can see, well, most days, a little bit smaller than ETFs. Actually here, way bigger because ETFs weren't around. All right. Some companies, by the way, were operating before, like as separate companies or doing slightly different things before they got into Bitcoin mining. I'm starting most of them in 2017, I believe, or I'm just starting the timeline for whatever companies eventually become a Bitcoin miner. I'm starting it and publicly traded in 2017. Again, this is all US based, also some US ADRs, but it's most of the data. I'll keep improving this, but this is what it is. So we're still in the billions or tens of billions with both of these together. And now for the last one, again, a publicly TradFi sort of comparable thing. Let's look at Bitcoin balance sheet companies, the volume, the value of shares traded, like MSTR, Metaplanet, so on and so forth. There we go. Okay, so this is actually much bigger. These are stacked, so I got to zoom in. 2024, 50 billion for Bitcoin balance sheet companies. ETFs and miners, 10, 15 billion. Caveats as well. I'm playing around with this idea with this charts. It's not the exhaust. If you go to Bitcoin Treasuries, you're going to see like 100 companies with Bitcoin. It's not every company. All right. I'm looking at top 20 in basically in each category, which is going to capture the lion's share of volume. It's very Pareto. All right. We can take off, let me just show you balance sheet alone. Take off ETFs and miners. All right, I'm starting it in August 20th when MicroStrategy, of course, was a stock before then, but I'm not showing it because it wasn't in Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin strategy started in August 2020. So, most of the action is MicroStrategy early here. And now as we've added more and more, we're getting up to here. Okay, so about, again, 10, 20 billion. Now, so this is the biggest category in stock, Bitcoin, TradFi-like entities, right, which are stocks. All right, is balance sheet companies. ETFs are smaller in terms of volume, and miners are smaller in terms of volume. Here they are all together, all three stacked up. But you can see the green. The balance sheet companies are clearly the lion's share of volume. Let me again now put Bitcoin itself, spot Bitcoin volume, back on. And so you can see what happens to the chart. Okay. TradFi plus Bitcoin spot. Again, a caveat. I don't have all of the futures instruments. This is kind of like TradFi spot versus Bitcoin spot. I don't have futures on Kraken or, I don't have Deribit information. Some synthetic Bitcoin instruments. This is mostly just TradFi stocks and their volume. Okay, I'll keep adding it, but again, as a proxy, you can sort of build it out. But the takeaway, what I'm trying to say is, the spot itself dominates the TradFi instruments in terms of volume. You can see this, right? So it's Bitcoin is 30, 40, 50 billion. All the TradFi together might be 10, 20 or 20, 30 on a good day, like that. 20, 30. All right, but Bitcoin there is 80 on that day a week ago. Okay, now let's look at percentage versus all the top stocks in the world. Apple, Meta, Microsoft, Tesla. By the way, Tesla is a Bitcoin stock, but I'm not counting it because they still have Bitcoin on the balance sheet, but they're obviously, it's not a primary Bitcoin company, so it gets a little bit artsy, right? I'm not putting Tesla as a balance sheet company. That would increase this. Just looking at sort of pure Bitcoin company plays. Also don't have any of these exotic MicroStrategy instruments. It's just strategy. But if I take off Bitcoin, all right, let's take off Bitcoin, spot, actual Bitcoin spot volume worldwide. We're left with this. All right, so we go from tens of billions on the scale here, actually hundreds of billions because of this candle. Take off the spot. Just looking now at total stock market volume of Bitcoin companies, whether it's a balance sheet company, Treasury company, ETF, or a miner. Tens of billions on the scale. Most of the time, 20, 30 billion max. Really 10, 20 billion, as I just said. Okay. And again, this is still kind of arbitrary. I'm working on it. I'll try to get a better, maybe I can get to the top 100 in all these categories. I'm not there yet. I told you it's top 20 for all these Bitcoin stocks. Now I got the top 30-ish stocks, except for Saudi Aramco, which doesn't trade anyway. There's no volume there. I'll put it up as a percentage. What are the Bitcoin stocks, the value of shares traded, versus all the top global stocks in the world? All right, put that up now. So it's growing. It's definitely, I know it gets hard to see, but let's just keep talking through this. Let me know if you have questions here. Again, this percentage would be volume of all three of these together, Bitcoin miners, ETFs, balance sheet companies, as a percentage of the top 30 stocks in the world. So it's not an exhaustive list. It's just trying to get a pattern. Obviously, Bitcoin's becoming more important, becoming more, in TradFi world, Bitcoin stocks are becoming more important. But, and here's the but, I would still submit to you, I'm looking for excuses that this time is different. It's a huge number if you think about it. I mean, and a lot of this is MicroStrategy, by the way. I should have just done MicroStrategy to give you the exact figure of that volume compared to the top ones. But, for all these Bitcoin treasury companies, Bitcoin miners, Bitcoin TradFi touching companies, at the moment, it's 10% of the volume of the top 30 stocks in the world. So certainly not nothing. It's way more than here in the pre-2020 days, pre-Saylor MicroStrategy days. Bitcoin has certainly arrived. But if you look at the 2021 cycle, let me take off even that. Let me just look at the percentage so we can see very clearly what I'm looking at. We still got up as far as global stocks, like mega global mega cap stocks. These Bitcoin stocks would trade at 20, 30% of those. So there was still some big pricing day action in 2021, and we had two bubbles in 2021, or booms. I know a lot of people in Bitcoin don't like it when I say bubble, but I had two booms. So this is what I'm putting out here is a theory or the hypothesis that I still think there's probably going to be a boom. Could be wrong, but if this thing was all of a sudden like 100% all the time, then it would be pretty clear that Wall Street is ready to long and short the volatility away from Bitcoin forever. It's a huge sector. No doubt it's a huge sector. I'll keep expanding this. I need to, for sure, the denominator, I got to get up to like the top 100 global stocks. And I will do it. And then that'll give maybe a better picture. Plus, there's no foreign companies. It's only U.S. So I don't have TSMC or, companies that originally trade in other exchanges. But at least in this numerator-denominator relationship, which is consistent, right? I get the key here is consistency. Definitely you can see Wall Street adoption here. This is the growth of Bitcoin company trading volume versus the top global trading volume. But I wonder if this is enough to stop a mega bull run. And combine that with the fact now, let's look at Bitcoin spot, which I guess spot, you can run shorts on spot on certain exchanges, but it's easier to short, of course, with futures. So again, just considering spot volume, it's way bigger as a percentage of global. This is that same percentage now, okay? And it's the same percentage that it was in the prior booms. If you catch my drift, okay? So now this is just Bitcoin spot volume. So if we had a retail-driven boom here, where Bitcoin went up to 20K, And Bitcoin's spot volume was 100% of the top 30 stock volume in the world. And if we had a retail-driven boom twice in 2021, you can really see it in the early days where it eventually went up to 290% of the top 30 stocks in the world. But most of the time it was 80, 100, whatever. I probably should get a smoother average, but 75%. Why would we expect now, where spot volume is still pretty high globally, I guess a little bit muted here, but why would we expect that the retail boom or the boom in general won't exist this time? Again, I'm not saying I'm for sure on this thesis, but I'm trying to talk through it. All right. You know this chart. If we've easily gotten above the number 9 on this chart in 2017, not as easily in 2021, but we did. Why would we presume we're not going to get there this time? We sure got over it in 2011 and 2013. Let me know thoughts, guys. I'm not trying to lecture. I'm trying to poke holes in the argument that this time is different, or maybe arrive at the conclusion that this time will be different. I don't know. It's a work in progress, this chart, but it's the numerator and the denominator are consistent, but I probably need more data. It's basically top Bitcoin stocks versus top global stocks is what you see in this percentage, or Bitcoin spot as well. All sorts of stuff going on in this chart. So Bitcoin spot dwarfs the other TradFi instruments, which you can short. I mean, they are rising, to a comfortable, say a comfortable 10% from the dawn of the ETF, right, which started right here, as you see. It's ETFs, ETF volume in dollar terms. Hi, Dominic. The question is just if this time is different, if TradFi is going to short the volatility out of the market and we're not going to have a boom by the end of the year or in a year, in 9 months, whatever. Is this time different? And I'm trying to show my bias is that this time will not be different, or let's not say it's going to be different until we see it's different in the percentiles. But here is all the US dollar denominated Bitcoin securities. All right, so we got miners, ETFs, and balance sheet companies. Balance sheet companies are the biggest share, as you can see. You put them all together, okay, $20 billion trading volume a day. But you compare that with the global stock volume, not insignificant. And this is the top 30, about top 30-ish global stocks. It might be like 32 or 33 companies that I pulled in. I need to increase this to make it all more apples to apples. But basically, as you see in the tooltip, this black line is, the dotted black line is Bitcoin stocks versus top global stock volume activity. And it's about the same level that it was in 2021. So if Wall Street's going to short the volatility out of the market, it's a little bit higher here. No, it's top 20. It's the majority, but it's not. It's not everything. It's a work in progress. The key thing is that the numerator and the denominator are the same. That's, stretching back to 2013. The trend should make sense. This is the Pareto. This is the vast majority of, I'm sure of it, of the Bitcoin activity. And then a fixed denominator of global stocks, which, as you can see, can be anything from 50 times this during the lulls of a Bitcoin bear to only, 10 or 4 or 5 times. This first time Bitcoin got to 100K. I know the price on this chart would help, but I don't have too many accesses at the moment. So it certainly can get up there. There you're at 40% of the global trading volume. It very quickly can get up there. But my question is, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people are saying that we're in for a muted bull or no bull at all. The 4-year cycle is done. I'm more of a believer in the trend being your friend. And then again, I know that you can short spot Bitcoin on some exchanges, but let's just assume. All right, so here's all the Bitcoin. Let's put the miners back. Sorry, balance sheet companies. We've got balance sheet companies, ETFs, and miners. All right, tens of billions on this scale, tens of billions. Most of the time, you can just look, 15 billion, right? Even now, if you add them up, a little bit more sometimes. 20, 30 at times, but mostly not. And then if I put Bitcoin spot on here, it just dwarfs the chart. Global spot exchange volume in dollar terms. It's not exhaustive. All right, this is not an exhaustive chart. I have to keep saying it. There are futures, like Kraken futures. Coinbase has futures now, I guess. They even got them regulated in. So I got to get those all pulled in, and it would be exhausting actually. But no, I mean that's the thesis. That's the thesis that I'm questioning, because people are saying, now that the institutions have arrived, now that we have all these ETFs, Bitcoin Treasury companies, this boom through this rainbow to the top of the range won't happen again. It's just not going to happen. That's the thesis. I'm sure you all have heard it. I've heard it on podcasts and various commentators. So I'm just checking, testing the thesis. Good evening, Tim. Hope all is well down under. Talking about TradFi volume versus Bitcoin spot volume versus Bitcoin TradFi volume. So again, to take off the TradFi stuff, the miners, the ETFs, let's just look at Bitcoin itself versus the top 30 global stock volume. It's a much bigger slice of the pie. And I'm still not convinced this is the best comparison, right? Because even if I got 100 stocks on here and you get most of the stock market, um, most of the big cap stock market, let's say, the currency markets are trillions of dollars. You got commodity markets. Well, that's always good. Nothing, nothing wrong with that. Bit late myself starting the episode. You paying in Bitcoin? So this stuff can obviously move fast. People don't pay attention. Look, no one paid attention at all here, even though Bitcoin was still doing $5 billion worth of volume. You can see compared to the rest of the global markets, very low. And then when price bumps, we had a big bump here in 2019, increases. In 2021, we went to the moon in volume. And by the way, these are business days. This is trading days to match this, and this. So Bitcoin, this orange pool trades every day, as you know. So there's even more volume on top of here that I'm not showing. Do we think that institutions are going to mute such a bull market should it come back again? Anyway, I'll come back to it. I'll I'm thinking about this, but even this one is pretty interesting, right? So this is just the Bitcoin spot volume versus the volume total, the top 30 stocks in the world. It's even higher here for longer. In 2019, there's like a mini bull. Theoretically, it should be lower because these top stocks, I guess some of them might have not been top stocks then, but it's the biggest companies in the world. I mean, it's just interesting to see, right? You would expect. I think what this chart continues to show is that there's a lot of trading volume that happens everywhere else in the world with other things that people don't care about. They don't think about Bitcoin. And we know that the Bitcoin price has pumped huge at levels that we're pretty much at today. So, in 2017, we got to 104% of these top 30 stocks, 22 billion. 104% today is happened once, happened twice. So I think this pokes holes in the thesis that Wall Street is going to somehow slay, or what's the word? I don't know, take the volatility out of this bull market. Well, next bull. Next bull, I guess. Like I said, it's a work in progress. There are futures volume here in Bitcoin that would there's even more futures volume. So that's actually something to consider itself because There's like futures on exchanges. I'm not plotting here. So if you add all that futures volume, there's been plenty of ways to short Bitcoin in the past. I said this. The CME futures started here. I'm not even showing CME futures. Those contracts don't have the volume of that. So why all of a sudden is this little ETF volume supposed to take the wind out of the sails of the bull market? When the spot volume is like this. ETF, spot. You can see the scale of the left-hand axis resize from 400 billion to 12 billion. Or Bitcoin Treasury companies dominated by MicroStrategy. Bitcoin spot, Bitcoin Treasury. A little bit higher scale here, 60 billion. Let me know thoughts. If people think it's the wind is going to come out of the sails of this this bull, I'm curious to know why. This 96% R squared power curve still grows at $100 a day at the moment. And it's even being pulled up a little bit faster now that we are above it. Every time we close above it, we pull it up faster. And as I said yesterday, I think 95% of this is the power curve of adoption itself. It's not really the Fed, interest rates, TradFi, gold. 95% of what you see right here is the adoption of Bitcoin itself as an amazing decentralized global network. Kind of. You could say that this is like institutional investment that was never here before. These things. But if you plot, again, like I said, if you plot all three of these things against Bitcoin spot, it doesn't really, it's a drop in the bucket still. Which is, by the way, part and parcel, I think, of why Saylor's been so successful. Is, you have to be large enough to convince Wall Street to give you money to buy Bitcoin and then maybe take a percentage on some preferreds or some exotic instruments that he's starting up. Most Bitcoin treasury companies can't even do that. So if most Bitcoin treasury companies can't do the special type of financing that Saylor's been doing, doesn't that say that Wall Street doesn't really care at this moment? Remember, these are business days. So when I skip a day here, right, from the 7th to the 8th of December or 9th to the 11th, where there's weekends, Bitcoin is still trading. Wall Street's not. No. People will certainly try. It's going to be interesting to see who tries. Metaplanet will be probably is trying right now. Let me pull up Rodolfo's site here. So it's a great website for those that want to track these Bitcoin treasury companies. And by the way, when I'm showing miners, I'm kind of mixing things. Like Marathon is a treasury company, but I'm listing them as a miner. I can't list them in two places. So Marathon is here on my chart in here. We have Trump's company, right? They're in there for me as well. Metaplanet. Galaxy. Tesla is not in my analysis at all, even though they should be, but it's, they're in the denominator as a large cap publicly traded company. So I'm going down to like here. Plus some more in this chart. All right. We got ETFs, which are not included. Actually, I guess they are included. No, his ETFs are. Where's ETFs? I guess they are in the total, but they're so small. No, where is? Yeah, he doesn't have ETFs in this list. His ETFs is a separate breakdown. Here we go. ETFs. So same thing. I'm taking top. Obviously, yeah, we got iShares 700,000. That's not in this list, right? So you got to count ETFs separately. Again, I'm going to like the top 20 here, and you see it falls off. I'll get more. I'll get more, but the lion's share of Wall Street right now in Bitcoin is these, as far as I can tell, it's these three entities. The treasury companies, which are green, ETFs, and miners. Yeah. No, I think banks are coming. They're trying to figure out how they're going to deal with it. Banks are probably going to become miners. A lot of capital will rotate into Bitcoin still, but we're not even close to that. Not even close. What I also need to do is get a list of major publicly traded banks and look at their trading volume compared to Bitcoin, or compared to Bitcoin treasury companies and Bitcoin ETFs, et cetera, et cetera. So again, like I said, it's a work in progress. You got to parse through the data in weird ways, but I don't think this chart shows me that Wall Street is dominating Bitcoin at the moment. Exchange level trades dominate Bitcoin. And we've always had that. We had that here and here and here and here. Had that here at smaller numbers, true. But, can these marginal extra buyers and sellers of Bitcoin, in fact, all of them are insanely bullish, right? I guess in the ETF volume, we can find some people that might want to short it, some family offices or something. But will these marginal little TradFi Bitcoin publicly traded registered companies stop a Bitcoin bull that goes to $300,000 per Bitcoin? Yes. Yes, it will. Then it's time to sell. Then it's time to sell when this happens. Hmm. So from withdrawals, deposits and withdrawals into exchanges, that was the reason. I've been debanked over here by Swedish banks. That was even years ago. Actually, surprised to hear that now. Was this before Trump's inauguration or after? So anyway, I think it's a good analysis. I think we need to keep an eye on it. Obviously, Rodolfo has the major data. Um, he's got great data on price and MNAV. I don't know if he has volume, actually. I don't see volume. So again, what I'm doing is just taking the volume of these publicly traded companies multiplied by the price, the close. That gets you this relative metric called value of shares traded. And you can compare that with Bitcoin traded in dollar terms. And the long and short of it is you have. So let's look at this. Here's his main one. 3.64 million Bitcoins in ETFs, publicly traded companies, and governments, which don't trade, obviously. And private companies, which I'm not showing at all. DeFi smart contracts, I'm not showing at all. And exchanges, which is, of course, their holdings, which is not that much anymore, to get 3.64 million in Bitcoin on balance sheet. Where do I want to look? ETFs, I guess. Yep, MTGOX still there with their 44,000. So counting up ETFs and public companies, not looking at exchange volume of futures and stuff, which is huge, by the way. I get a TradFi volume, value of shares traded in the day, that's only $10 to $20 billion. And if you do that versus the top stocks, it's significant. But obviously, the top stocks isn't even a great denominator. Let's just ask Gemini what the global. Yeah, so it's really not a great denominator that I'm showing. $374 trillion. All right. And if you look at my metrics so far, which is pretty basic, and it's a consistent denominator, but it's not huge. It's only 150 billion. Is the top 30 stocks in the world. So, it's a lot of work to get all that data into the denominator. But this should tell you even more how big the stock market is. And look at that. That's only NASDAQ. This is just one exchange and 1 day's data. No, did I say trillion? Sorry, billion. Billion. Yeah, trillion would be insane. 375 billion for NASDAQ. In this chart, this denominator, this percentage, I got 150 billion as of today. So it's half the size of NASDAQ to get this denominator. The point is, I'm looking for some denominator to give me a percentage to see the penetration of Bitcoin in the market. And it's growing, but it's not gigantic. Still? Haven't gotten it back? Did you have your claim outstanding? Or something happened to your claim, didn't it? Hi, Jim. Hi, John. Happy to have you here. Let me know if you can poke holes in the thesis that this time will be different. That's what I'm trying to do. Basically, for all of these Bitcoins, and in truth, I just mean here, 1.5 million in ETFs, 1 million in publicly traded companies, and that's it. The others, I'm not counting on trading, but for 2.5 million Bitcoins, the spot volume, I know that there's futures volume on these, like there's CME futures and things. I'm not counting that either. But the spot volume is, quote, only 10, 20 billion. So NASDAQ does 375 billion on a day. I guess I just need to get it from the exchanges. That's probably the best way. Instead of finding individual stock data, it's kind of as the denominator. Anyway, will this time be different? Yeah, we got more Bitcoin Treasury companies. We got more ETFs. But the spot volume of Bitcoin is still the dominant thing in that picture. It can happen very quick. Slowly, then suddenly. Yes, sir. That's a pretty marketed number, though. The leverage on BitMEX was, I think, the overall was never really over 10x because they just close you out. If you win 100x, you'd lose it the next day. So the net exposure of any one individual's leverage was usually something like 9x, I think. That's what I heard at one time. But Yeah, that's a exciting factor for people. Yeah, I agree with you, Anders. I really do think it's just human psychology. It's the nature of markets, madness of crowds. Um, Also, the Lindy effect happens in many such cases, right? Like it's happened before, could happen again. I know it's not the precise definition of the Lindy effect, but it's a technology that we've seen do this, 4 times now. That was really the main chart I wanted to show today. No other wild macro charts prepared, but if you guys want to see, again, old Jerome Powell holding steady. Trump hates him, but he's doing what he has got to do. You know, trillions of dollars are in fixed income, treasury markets. If you look at this, I got to pull this out a month actually. We'll see how this trade deals shake themselves out. But if they, it seems like even though Europe got such a raw deal, at least people are getting stability in order to plan for the next few years. It doesn't seem like, as I thought in April, that more countries were going to threaten to sell treasuries. If they did, this green line would have to go up quick to buy more. Yeah, I think so too. There's precedent to go up to 28%. All right. Federal Reserve can own 28% of the United States federal debt and not be out of historical range. Now they're at 17.6%. And even lower if I put the next month on, which I'll do right now. Keep forgetting to update this. I think if anything, it is this publicly, the Treasury companies themselves, the idea of just buying Bitcoin on balance sheet, then creating an instrument which provides liquidity for you to buy more Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is obviously dominating it. Many other people are trying it. This is enough to cause a boom in Bitcoin and then a crash in Bitcoin. You don't even need a Wall Street. Here's the chart stretched out another month. Debt actually slightly lower last month. You can see it almost bottoming. Getting ready to take off again. And then if I show you the long-term trend lines of the Fed balance sheet, remember, it's a very similar chart to this, but it showed the trend lines. We see that the Federal Reserve is under trend on two different scales. Hold on. Not far under trend. Here it comes. All right, so this is total balance sheet now. This is just total securities, which is most of the balance sheet. All right, see the exact difference. 6.35 trillion. Total balance sheet is 6.66 trillion. Nice number right there. 6.662 trillion. Under trend. Never going to be on this trend anymore, but they're going to get back to this trend. By the way, this is the remember, this is the Paul Samuelson socialist economic money can just be like, you know, done in a central bank computer trend line. Whole great moderation. Everybody just lived along this 100% R squared. I grew up learning about economics on this beautiful trend line. It was just how it worked. They'd had it all figured out. Then, of course, the global financial crisis hit. Think about when they talk about normalizing the balance sheet, how far away they are from actually normalizing. Normalizing would be getting back to the blue line. It is true that the deep trend from the World War I and World War II debt purchases is actually higher. You could make an argument of that, but that's normal. But remember, I stop calculating the black line here, and then I just project. Once the Nixon shock ended, I ran a new trend line, and then that's here. That's really what they mean when they're talking about normal, is this blue line. And they are $4 trillion over it. 4 trillion. 3.7. Just saw this. Leverage booster. I've never met anyone who made money on BitMEX. Sure, it's happened. Most of the people I talk to that have traded on BitMEX with leverage have lost money. But that is the degen game. Which is still great support for a new bull, right? If our deregulated exchanges are offering these products and we have all these futures products and ways to short or super leverage long Bitcoin on the deregulated platforms, why would regulated Wall Street, which is only doing this much in volume, why would that stop a huge Bitcoin bull and perhaps a Bitcoin crash? It's fun to think about, but I never even tried. I just knew I'd lose the coins, so never tried. And I'm still very curious about this one right here. Number 6. What's going to happen what's going to happen? Is this as far back as they go? Is this real? Was it only in July when they made, like 21st of July when they made this purchase? Guess so. So 18,000 coins in DJT. What's going to happen when, pitchforks come out? I'm not hoping for this. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but after all the Bitcoin Treasury companies have levered up their stashes and then they can't pay the interest rate on the way down in price, get liquidated. What's going to happen to this company, which is currently trading at 2.25 MNAV and ranked number 6 in all Bitcoin Treasury companies? Do you think, the mainstream media is going to be talking about the wonder and beauty of Bitcoin? Yeah, same. I agree. And it was easier to hold Bitcoin, and even if you wanted to trade it back in the day, because there just wasn't that many stocks or other things to trade into, other coins if you wanted to shitcoin trade. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying if we go on the 4-year cycle, that's a year out from the top. This is like caveman math, I know, but if we assume the 4-year cycle, we assume a pump into the end of this year. All right. So the pump happens somewhere around here. The top, maybe 2x the trend, at least, I think. 250K Bitcoin. Then we start a leg down for another year. Go into the mid or start of 2027. Let's put the 10th percentile is, lo and behold, happens to be about the top from the last cycle, which is how it works, right? So it could eventually go sideways to down, back to number one, which is $65,000 per Bitcoin, 0.3x the trend. It amazes me how people talk themselves into they talk themselves into sort of the Zen moment. It's like you look the other way when Russia bombs Ukrainians. Sorry, I had to do it. I had to say it. But unless you're really, thinking about it, you're in the moment, whatever, you don't want to think about it. You forget about it, and you forget about the carnage of the cycle that just happened 3 years ago. There's a big Bitcoiner in Lithuania who I think he's a politician. He was a poker player. I don't know much about him. Lithuania, not Latvia. You ever heard of this guy? Tony G. He's a Lithuanian, Australian businessman, poker player, politician, and philanthropist. Anyway, I know he was big in crypto and poker. So yeah, to your point, I think there's a lot of overlap between poker, degen gambling, Bitcoin. I honestly do not, Dan. I don't. I'm not opposed to looking at it or taking flyers on something, but it's such a it's such a different sort of thing that I'm really interested in. I'm looking more at kind of macro where Bitcoin could fit in. I think if you look at some of the stuff I talk about, you know, the altcoin pumps do happen. They have always happened, uh, but I haven't focused on it. Maybe I'll try to look at some metrics or something. But individual tokens, like doing that, it's too much trading view, too much different, lines on charts and things. And I'm just not interested in that as much. I'm more interested in like the macro. The macro and the power curve. Certainly a wild time to be alive. I was born here in the 80s. I remember my first economics class talking about the Fed funds rate and the Federal Reserve. Everybody thought it was just going to consistently grow its balance sheet at a 6.7% per year compound return. Nope. Had to go a bit crazy to bail out the markets. And now they're growing at 9.3% per year. So if the Fed is getting 9.3% per year, we all better be getting 9.3% per year. I should. People say that Caspa has been doing a power curve, but again, I haven't vetted it. Just like strategy as well. I guess strategy is starting to do a power curve. If you think about it, it will do a power curve. It will. It can't not. Right? Like, also, someone was just showing me Meta Planet is on a power curve right now. Let me find it from Luke. Here's Luke sent me this. Here's Meta Planet's price and days since. Oh, you can't see this very well. It says days since Bitcoin strategy down here. All right. And it's log, so it doesn't really matter. But the point is, when you do log, and you plot the points, you'll get a straight line. So it's like here with the power curve. And again, my log bottom always screws up. Don't look at the axis, but you can look at the tooltip. If we go log bottom, all right, this is wacky. Don't look at this. It's not January 6, 2009, but it will work in the tooltip. So log is a straight line on log scale. A power curve, a power law, power function. Bitcoin is clearly power. There's nothing else in the financial world that's like it. So stocks will also move like this that hold Bitcoin. I'm sure of that. Basically, you stretch, it's kind of weird to think about log dates. It's actually log days, but, you stretch out the early days, you compress the later days. So we're moving like, if I just move the mouse, I'm moving like already a month here. Whereas here, I got a lot more days to spread out. And anyway, all the stocks that hold Bitcoin are going to do this. It's a nice sustainable curve. And if you look at it on just regular, you get this nice sustainable curve. Yeah, I mean, caveat emptor. I think I certainly don't judge. If people want to, I've heard some Bitcoiners describe altcoins as leveraged Bitcoin for a long time. And I think that's actually a pretty apropos analogy. Of course, it's not leveraged in the traditional sense, but it's leveraging the idea of Bitcoin mostly with no substance or source, but just complete hopium. But there are, some chains that have been around for a long time. But it probably would be good to start looking at like ETH in BTC terms, at least, because that's been struggling. Let me know if you like this too, or if you want more of the volume, because I'm trying to figure out a way to show really how small Bitcoin is in Wall Street at the moment. Also, we interviewed Scaramucci a month ago, maybe now, big Bitcoiner from 2017 or so. And he, I asked him, I'm like, has it arrived on Wall Street? Is Bitcoin really synonymous with gold, oil, blue chip stocks? And he said no. He still thinks it's not. And anecdotally, that's what I hear as well from a lot of people that are on Wall Street or talk to people on Wall Street. That's been my experience with Wall Streeters. Some that are just completely, in the family wealth mindset, have no idea even what a UTXO is or how Bitcoin works. So I think if you look at this chart, which encapsulates most of the volume of Bitcoin stocks in the TradFi world, there's definitely more. It's not a complete list, but it's not that much, especially when you consider one day of NASDAQ is 375 billion. We're at 20 billion on a good day. On a really good day, we're at 60 billion. Yeah, it's published. Everything you can see on my site. Just go here. Sorry, why is this taking so long? So I got YouTube channel and then the Crypto Voices podcast, which is a name Bitcoiners don't like, but I haven't changed it in 8 years now. Started in 2017. So talk about Ukraine stuff, talk about Bitcoin stuff. You can find all the feeds here, even Stitcher, which I don't think is around anymore. I should probably change that. Yeah. Yeah, that's really the brass tacks of it, isn't it, Tim? Like this entire portion of their balance sheet is bad, is zombie debt. It's zombie debt that still exists to this day. Fannie and Freddie, these agencies, these mortgage-backed securities, this is bad real estate debt. The Fed holds real estate on their books, and it's all here. Not all. There is some extra government securities as well, particularly here from the word that shall not be named, or I'll get even further downgraded by the algorithm. But they're never coming back from this. There's no the fiat normal, modern fiat normal is 6.7% per year. Larry Summers, Paul Samuelson, Stiglitz, all these guys, whether you like them or you don't. Milton Friedman was teaching those guys, just talking about theory. Everybody's thinking, well, must be working. Let's just keep pumping out a few $1 billion a month. Something broke. And if you think, if the markets could break with this sort of balance sheet expansion, which is completely predictable, how are the markets going to look with this kind of balance sheet expansion and contraction, which was here and here? And remember the repo market, which is just, it's the short-term secondary market for treasuries. It's spiked right here. You can't really see it, but if you back out and you see how they were just kind of slowly trying to let that balance sheet reduce to normal, the market at some point said, nope, we need more reserves. It's too risky. And repo markets spiked up to like 10% here. And then they started to increase the balance sheet again. This was before the P word started. So it wasn't even in a good place. And then, of course, all hell broke loose. Bitcoin is the solution. I really do think it's going to make a big difference. I just hope that in the meantime, we don't blow ourselves up with all the threats that are thrown around these days for nothing. Also, this is a so this is the same period I was talking about. Remember the repo spike? The repo issue was right here in September 2019. The Fed, as a percentage of the U.S. federal debt, was 15.7%. That was the low, 15.7%. That's how much money. That's how much money. That's how much the printing press was as a component of the total federal debt. And if you look back at the history of the Fed, about that number caused the sort of end of, well, that was a pain point in the Vietnam War, and the Vietnam War ended, and actually they increased debt even more because people were still holding U.S. bonds. But that was interesting. That was a high here in April 1975, and then it was a low here in September 2019. And where are we right now? 17.5%. Very close to this number, 15. So again, I'm not too much into like the voodoo of numbers, but you know, this is it's harder to draw trend lines on percentages. You can do it, but you can see that, you know, this was the bailout of the global financial crisis. They swapped out their treasury bonds for corporate bonds for a time, and then bailed out all the companies, and eventually swapped back the treasuries. But they gave all these, you know, these mergers, acquisitions, and they gave all these corporate guarantees. But after QE 1, 2, and 3, they couldn't go lower than this, 15.7%. So they're not going to go lower than 15.7%. I'm almost sure of that. And you can even see it's cresting as far as this percentage. Going to be in Riga for the Honey Badger. Going to be in Helsinki for the Bitcoin Hell Conference or whatever it's called. I'm not actually sure. But if anybody is coming to those conferences, look me up. You can look me up anytime you come to Riga, but I'm not in the city anymore, but still, you can look me up. And I might speak in Amsterdam, which is in November. Bitcoin Magazine. November has been a good month for Bitcoin every 4 years, right? Happy Days, 2013. Happy Days in 2017. 2021, we were early, but it was still Happy Days in 2021 with a double top. When you look back in time, it looks easy, but I predict it will be tricky. That's the only thing I can predict. Not going to go too much longer, guys, but if you have any questions, let me know. What is the sector? Can I ask, Anders? I can imagine it is the busiest time. So I'll work on this one. TradFi volume. 50, 60 billion. On a good day right now, we're 12 billion. Down from a bigger week last week. Includes ETFs, strategy, balance sheet companies, the biggest ones, miners. There is futures volume, on exchanges and stuff, which I'm not encapsulating here. But the global spot volume just dwarfs this. So my message for today, and I'm looking for reasons to poke holes in my argument that, this time will be different. I don't think it will be different. Not my argument, but the argument that a lot of people are making right now. That volatility will be muted. Bitcoin will be softer on the upside, also on the downside. We will see. Nothing outrageously different, though, even in sheer volume numbers compared to 2021. Nice. Good for you. That's beautiful. That's a great speculation right there. That's Doug Casey would say the definition of a great speculator is someone that can play off of government intervention in the economy, and that's a great speculation. Interesting. Good for you. Well, I know where you're putting the excess cash. So I'm looking forward to tracking this together with you and everybody this cycle, because I'm sure it's going to be a doozy. I'm sure. A lot of people aren't. A lot of people say we're going, even people that don't believe in the power curve somehow believe we're going up in smooth levels together here. Messed up my figures. That's okay. $125K is the trend line by the end of the year. All right. I think we at least go 2 or 3x the trend. I still think that. Well, I wasn't even saying it like that. It was just, everybody's got to look out for themselves. And if you don't, somebody else would. And as exactly like you said. So it is what it is. It's great speculation for sure. All right, everybody. I'm going to leave it here today. Thank you for watching. You guys have a good week. But I'll be here tomorrow if you want to tune in. Please like, subscribe if you can donate to my BTC Pay server. I need to say that. Other than Debify and a few sponsors every once in a while, I just mostly stay here. So completely independent, trying to give away the content for free. Thank you, Yahim. Yeah, totally agree, Anders. Okay, guys. Have a good one.